So like I said, so my background is in tourism, so I can think of some examples focusing in on that industry. In my experience, people want it to be scarier than it is. So we would take people in, and there is perhaps a level of, also some of them are surprised that it's, not terrifying, and it is fine. Like visiting in terms of being a tourist and stuff, it's not a terrifying experience. But that being said, some people want to go back with exciting stories. And I recall going in 2019 with a young chap on the tour who came up to me on the bus and said, "I think all of the trees are made of plastic. I just saw someone dusting them." And I said, "That sounds like a lot more work than just planting trees." And it's just that no. He was adamant that these were fake. And I was like, what? Why? Why would they do that? And then also this idea of everywhere I go, everything's going to be fake and staged. And that's just, I think, some people are overestimating their own importance. The country doesn't care what you see. Like, you go into the country and I go, I was in this spa and it was full of people. They were all actors. I go, no, they weren't, because the country doesn't care about you that much. They're not going, we've got a group of 15 tourists, you must prepare a whole series of set pieces. Like, they don't, of course they don't think like that. But people want that, so they, in a way, I suppose, trick themselves into seeing it. And also, people vlogging and doing videos, that's fine, but they'll go and sit in the darkest corner of the hotel while we're all downstairs having a beer and going, "I'm here in the Yangakdo International Hotel, and it's terrifying and none of the lights work." And then you walk up and be like, "Well, mate, we're all downstairs having a beer. Do you want to..." No? Okay. Like, that's an anecdote from a friend of mine, actually. He did do that. He walked up to this chap filming in a corridor and just went, "We're downstairs. Do you want a beer?" And it sort of ruined his little video.
Hello everyone, it's your host Tony. Welcome to another episode of Actually Existing Socialism. What you just heard is a gem from this episode's discussion featuring the host of the excellent YouTube channel called DPRK Explained. The host of DPRK Explained is Ben Weston. In this episode, we'll be discussing Ben's YouTube channel, which provides unique insight into the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, also known as the DPRK for short, or North Korea. Ben has been running this channel for 3 years. The background, some of which we cover in our discussion, that led him to create the channel include his experience with DPRK tourism, having previously been based in Beijing. He's looking forward to working again on cultural engagement and tourism projects with the DPRK in the near future, once the country reopens again for tourism, which it allegedly will in 2024. Ben is currently living in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, a former socialist nation, a unique experience that we'll touch on in this episode as we cover much more. Ben can be found on Twitter at Ben Weston DPRK. Links can be found in the show notes. This show is 100% listener funded, so if you do wish to contribute as a Patreon subscriber, you will gain access to a variety of bonus episodes of content, which are currently under development, depending on when you're listening to this. So shout out to my patrons. If you're unable to contribute, no problem. You can help out by sharing this episode by following us on Twitter at AES the Podcast. You can also subscribe to the show on your preferred podcast platform to get new episode notifications. Also, feel free to leave a review if you have time, or even just a star rating. It really helps with the algorithm. I recommend checking out the back catalog as well when you have the chance. As always, you can really help out the show by engaging in local worker struggles, whatever form that may be. The interlude for this episode is a snippet from one of Ben's most popular episodes entitled North Korean TV Explained, DPRK television channels.
Around 2015 to 2016, the Manbang set-top box was first released, allowing Koreans to live stream shows on demand, access live broadcasts from KCTV, Mansudae TV, Yeongnam-san TV and Sports TV, as well as potentially allowing for further reach into those areas of rural Korea where analogue signals are less receivable. Reports on KCTV have covered regions in the far northeast, where locals have used Manbang, connected to the intranet, to access training programs for workers which had not previously been easily accessible. Along with work education services in the 4 main TV channels, it's also possible to read the headlines, such as from the Nodong Shinmun newspaper. Tune into Voice of Korea and other live radio broadcasts, and, as previously mentioned, watch shows on demand, such as artistic performances, movies and TV shows, cartoons, documentaries, or other programs broadcast on TV. Since launch in the 1960s, television in the DPRK has expanded, improved, and developed on multiple different fronts. And the recent expansion to on-demand services, improved broadcasting resolutions, and other technical factors hints at more developments to come. In addition to this, increasingly sophisticated graphics, the use of drones and new camera angles for important events, and a rapidly evolving style of broadcasting, both on television and other media, means this is far from the end of the road for television in the DPRK.
I'm glad to welcome onto the show Ben Weston, the host of the DPRK Explained YouTube channel.
Lovely, thank you very much for having me. Yeah, very nice to be invited on to talk about it.
Yes, I'm very excited to speak to you about it, particularly because listeners of the show have been requesting that I expand the reach of socialist countries that I talk about. I've done episodes on Cuba, the Soviet Union, East Germany, and even Laos, but we haven't reached DPRK until now.
I'm glad to be of service.
You're actually going to be the first of a kind of a series of episodes on North Korea. I'll be speaking to some of the other people who've been there to look forward to. So quite simply, from what I understand, the goal of your excellent YouTube channel is to explain interesting and overlooked topics regarding the DPRK, or the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. You have about 42 videos on your channel, almost 40,000 subscribers, which is amazing. The most popular video that you have is the North Korea TV Explained. That video has about 500,000 views. So you have quite a reach, which is awesome. So what led you to create the DPRK Explained channel, assuming that most people don't generally wake up in the morning saying, hey, I want to start a YouTube channel about North Korea?
So prior to COVID, I was working in DPRK tourism based in Beijing. And there was a lot of ideas I had while I was working there for, mainly, to be honest, a lot of my work was in marketing. So it was promoting travel to the country and sort of encouraging people to at least spark an interest in it, I suppose. I think the one thing I always sort of point to is while I was there, we were planning this railway project, something to do with trains, and I couldn't find a map of the railway network anywhere. So I made one. I sat down with all the sort of collated as much information as I could and sort of put it all together and made this massive, I don't know, it was probably a 1 meter by 1 meter wall map, I suppose. And then COVID came and I had to leave China, and effectively I thought, well, I could animate that map. That would be a cool thing. At no point did I have any real intention to start a YouTube channel. At the time, I think the YouTube channel was still just my name and had some random stuff that I'd made as a teenager on there. But I animated this map and I went online and it got a couple of hundred views, and a couple of people on Twitter said it was interesting. And then as I thought I could do another one, so I made a video on Air Koryo, the national airline. And then I think it was around that point, it was either the Air Koryo one or the Pyongyang Metro video I did after that, where it suddenly exploded quite dramatically from 200 subscribers to about 5,000, which was ridiculous as far as I was concerned. And I just sort of kept doing it and teaching myself how to do, teach myself different animation techniques and stuff, finding new topics that people were interested in. As the audience grew, you get a lot more people who are in, who will comment and say, I'd love you to do a video on this or a video on that. So my list of potential ideas grew. And I essentially just haven't stopped since then.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'm pretty sure because you said the videos started coming out during COVID.
Yeah.
So I think I may have been one of the early viewers. I'm not sure.
Thank you very much.
I do remember like early on in the pandemic being like, oh, this is really interesting. I'll subscribe. So since that time I've been watching the videos. They've been incredibly informative, educational. You mentioned animating maps, and it's like I feel like maps aren't something like, I guess maybe as a kid I'd go through like those World Atlas books,
Yeah. No, I used to love doing that.
And so so like seeing like kind of an animated version of that was kind of like an expansion of that idea.
Yeah, that was a big. I've always liked, again, like you said, atlases and maps and things, and I have a lot of maps of Korea and stuff. And really, a lot of the earlier videos at least, the idea would be sparked by me finding an old map or an interesting map I hadn't seen before and going, I could make that into a video. There's something there I can do with it, and I think that did spark it a lot. And it was also maps, I think I've always found, are a good way to get across information, and then animating them and turning it into a sort of short video, they're increasingly becoming short documentaries now lengthwise, but it's a good way to just get across a lot of information and explain stuff quite easily.
Later on in our conversation, we'll get into your experience of tourism visiting North Korea, but I did want to talk about specifically, as you mentioned, you have maps in your videos, but you also have like tons of other footage as well. What we normally get in Western media about the DPRK is that there's this sense that it's so isolated that we essentially know nothing, we see nothing, we hear nothing, and if there's any footage at all that we see, it's often of the military parades, of missile launches, and similar things of that sort. One could surmise like that's pretty much all that happens if you watch CNN or Fox. And I think recently the BBC actually had a documentary about North Korea, and a lot of their depictions of North Korea were actually animated. They're using the experiences of the defectors and animating those stories rather than using any sort of footage of the country. So what I found, and I'm sure what most of your viewers have found, is how how eye-opening it is to see all this footage of the country in your videos, of music, of movies, of film. How does one actually access these varieties of DPRK media? Is there some hidden trove of information you have access to, Benjamin, or is there something else that we can tap into?
Yes, you're right. So the bulk of it is not my footage. There's a few videos I've used where I've used footage that I've filmed or friends of mine that I've worked with have filmed. But yes, you're right. The bulk of it is come from DPRK media. Effectively, it's one of the hardest parts of making the videos. Is less so the animating and more so the finding the specific clips, because there isn't a huge database of all this sort of filed information. You really just have to search through the various DPRK media websites. Well, they're available internally, but also externally online. And they upload huge amounts of information, news reports from KCTV, the state broadcaster. Also, videos and sort of shorter clips made to be published on these websites online. And usually it's some of the random stuff. You just find that 15-second clip that you need. So a good anecdote, I suppose, for this is I did a video on the national holidays in the country. And I was talking about the statues in Chongjin, so a city far up in the northeast of the country. And I was talking sort of about the layout and how they celebrate these things. And there is this large boulevard, this huge open area in the city that runs from the statues of the leaders down to the coast. And I wanted a video clip of that. And it took about 3 days of trawling through different video clips of different celebrations until you just find a 10-second clip buried in the middle of an unconnected video that just goes, oh, now we're going to have a look at Chongjin. And suddenly you go, great, okay, I've got that little clip of footage. A lot of it is just trawling through websites, using keywords to sort of try and work out the best approach to find these bits of footage. And then again, some of it is stuff that I've filmed or colleagues of mine have filmed in the country in the past. So a mix.
Yeah, so that's one thing that surprised me too in looking and learning more about North Korea was that, as you mentioned, there's news sites that are in English or in other languages of their official news media. There are video clips of things, as you mentioned as well. There's magazines I've seen online in English. Maybe not in English, but with like pictures of say for example like new housing developments, and things like that across the country. And I think not sure if this is ironic or not, but Twitter has probably been the place where I've found the most media about North Korea. Videos like people may have like a Google Drive link to 100 movies from the country. So I'll try and link to some of that stuff in the show notes.
Yeah, no, it's disseminated around. It's available. You just have to know where to look for it, I think.
Yeah, I guess maybe that's part of the fun. So with that said, do you think that is purposeful, or is that like what causes that kind of disbursement of it, or the kind of challenge of finding it?
I wouldn't say that anything necessarily causes it. I just think that it is such a niche area that there's not that many people searching for it, and also they're putting a huge amount of information and footage and huge number of videos out constantly. So the pool you have to search through to find stuff is huge. I mean, often I think a lot of it as well is it's all tailored for Koreans, not for foreigners and people speaking English. So if I'm searching for something, I'm not typing and searching in English. I'm typing keywords and things in Korean because it's all tailored that way. So I think that's potentially a reason why it's not everywhere and so well known. But equally, there are people who are very interested in it, and it does get disseminated. I tend not to link specifically to where I found stuff, just because I don't want it to take away from from the video itself, and also you never want to give away quite exactly where you get your stuff from. I think there are a lot of people who do find videos and things, and there's a lot of YouTube channels that do upload these same videos in Korean or in English or in Chinese, Japanese. So it is all out there. It's just about working out where it is, and then working out how to find it.
One thing I've noticed is that I kind of mentioned this earlier, that often what we'll see on the news is a military parade, or Kim Jong Un giving a speech, something of that sort, but never like daily life videos, like some of the stuff that you share, or just people walking or people dancing or singing. You just never see that.
I mean, this is very much my modus operandi for the channel, which is, whilst that side of things does interest me, and the politics and all that, it is very interesting. It's not. It's covered. It's been covered, and I think that this comes more to do with algorithms and YouTube and stuff. And what I've learned in the past 3 years is you do need to find something. You do need to find a niche that hasn't already been done, because you go into something which is very popular and people are really interested in, you will get people interested in your channel and in your videos because it's a popular topic, but you're not standing out beyond everyone else. And also, it interests me more than anything else is the daily life, perhaps because we don't see it very often and it's not reported on, but it's the way, ordinary life, sort of daily life of people in the country, how things work, basic logistics that perhaps you wouldn't find interesting if I made a 25-minute video on the rail network of Canada, but you find it interesting about the DPRK because it's not so readily available. You can't just Google it and go, oh, there's a map of it. And well, you can now because I've made one. But yeah, I think that's perhaps why, that's my interest. And so that goes into the videos, and people seem to like it.
Before we move on to the next question, I did want to have you confirm for us or not, whether North Korea has only one train.
I can confirm that I have been on a train and seen another train, so I can confirm that there is more than one train in the country.
There you have it, people. For those who understand this reference, this will be one of those moments you'll never forget.
Train station somehow had a lot of dead bodies because North Korea is very cold, and there's a train waiting area, and North Korea has one train go to one distance like once a month. And like here it would take like 1 hour to go the other place. In North it take a month at least to go because there's no electricity, and sometimes people have to push the train.
They have to push the train.
Yeah.
Anyways, moving on. So in looking up your channel online, say for example, if you Google DPRK Explained, one of the things that comes up as the Google fill-in for the phrases or whatever, is DPRK Explained propaganda and accusations or allegations that you are running a propaganda channel, potentially funded by the DPRK
by anyone.
Government. So by anyone, exactly. Some shadowy force. So can you address comments such as these?
I think the issue in this industry and in this field is whatever you do, you're going to get accusations either way. So I tend to ignore it and never challenge it either. I'm not out on a crusade to prove a point. What I say is everything that I've made in all the videos, I try to keep an unbiased perspective, but also keep focus on the topic of the video. So people will say, why aren't you talking about this? Why aren't you talking about that? Because it's a video about the metro. I can't cover every aspect of the country in one video. But also, it's not what the channel's aimed at. The channel is aimed at just the everyday lives of people, how the country operates, what it's like being there or visiting there. And I think also focusing on more underreported and lesser known stuff. So in terms of the media ecosystem around the DPRK, it is very focused on the politics and other aspects that people are used to hearing about. So when they watch a video that maybe isn't about that or shies away entirely from that kind of side of things, perhaps people see that as actively avoiding talking about certain things. That being said, I think also it's not unknown that I worked in tourism and will continue to work on projects in tourism in preparation for the country reopening. So I do have an inherent bias. I think it's important you recognize some level of inherent bias that we all have in whatever we do. And I do. I mean, I have colleagues and friends in and from the DPRK that I have worked with and talked to and things. So I think maybe people know that as well. And so all comes together to this idea, well, he must be being paid or have this perspective. But I really just want to focus on stuff that I find interesting and that isn't covered.
It's, in thinking about this question, there's a question of, whether your channel is quote unquote propaganda. It's like, if you go back to the original definition of propaganda, at least in English, the idea was that it wasn't necessarily, it was more of a neutral term. Essentially saying, a dissemination of information in favor of any given point or cause or whatever it is. And so countries, or companies or whoever make propaganda just like, hey, look, it's like saying, I have a mom and my mom is great and I'm going to say nice things about her. But, just because she tells me to clean my room does not mean that I will not say,
yes,
objective facts about my mother.
Yes,
right? Just that she does this and she does that. And
I think the
mother might be too much of a
no. I agree with your point. I think the one thing that separates, from my perspective at least, separates the stuff I'm doing from any kind of propaganda there's really no motive behind it. I'm doing it purely to be honest, it's a very selfish project because I'm just doing it because I want to get this information out somewhere, and if people want to watch it, they can watch it. I would make these videos if they got 100 views or 500,000 views. It's really just a way for me to throw information out there that no one else in my life wants to talk to me about.
Yeah, no, okay. So I can 100% relate to that. Before I started this podcast, I just love reading books and learning things, especially about socialism or whatever. I couldn't just keep telling my wife, summarizing every single book I read to her every single day, right? So I had to get it out in some other fashion, especially during COVID. I was like, I can't just dump all of this on her. So this is one of those outlets.
No, definitely. I mean, I can't go sit in the pub and talk to my friends anymore about something that's just happened in the country. Yeah, no. So this is very much a way of me just distracting myself from other people.
The accusations of propaganda also made me think about, I guess, maybe actual propaganda in the negative sense that people often are referring to. Say, for example, when it comes to film, how the American military partners with Hollywood often, movies such as Top Gun, to produce these films and to get their support and to be able to use the U.S. Army logo in their planes, et cetera, et cetera. So, I noticed that you did not have the support of the military.
No. I mean, I'm not. I think I think that's the one time I've ever not so much hit back at the accusations, but I did add onto the bio of the channel about a year ago, explicitly saying I'm not affiliated with any association or government or a business. It's just often you'll get comments. I had someone comment not too long ago, being like, the team behind this did really well. I'm like, the whole team behind this video. I'll let all of them know because it's just me. I'm really unaffiliated with any kind of group. So that's
You're behind the Benjamin Weston group.
I am. It's just me.
Shadowy cabal.
Me and my own biases. Exactly.
Something I like to do in the show is I sometimes will have a kind of a longer quote to kind of make a point. And so here I'm going to be drawing on a quote from Manufacturing Consent by Noam Chomsky and Edward Herman. I can't remember the other guy's name, but Noam Chomsky, of course, everyone knows him. So this is a quote from early on in the book. So I'm just going to read it now. I might edit this down because it's kind of a long one for the actual episode, but I'll just read it out now. So it says, the mass media serves a system for communicating messages and symbols to the general populace. It is their function to amuse, entertain, and inform, and to inculcate individuals with the values, beliefs, and codes of behavior that will integrate them into institutional structures of the larger society. In a world of concentrated wealth and major conflicts of class interests, to fulfill this role requires systemic propaganda. In countries where the levers of power are in the hands of a state bureaucracy, The monopolistic control over the media, often supplemented by official censorship, makes it clear that the media serves the ends of the dominant elite. It is much more difficult to see a propaganda system at work where the media are private and formal censorship is absent. This is especially true when the media actively competes, periodically attacks, and exposes corporate and governmental malfeasance, and aggressively portrays themselves as spokesmen for free speech and general community interest. What is not evident and remains undiscussed in media is the limited nature of such critiques, as well as the huge inequality in command of resources, and its effect both on access to a private media system and on its behavior and performance. A propaganda model focuses on this inequality of power, wealth, and power, and its multi-level effects on mass media interests and choices. It traces the routes by which money and power are able to filter out the news fit to print, marginalizes dissent, and allows the government and dominant private interests to get the messages across to the public. The essential ingredients of our propaganda model, or set of news filters, fall under the following headings. 1. The size, concentrated ownership, owner wealth, and profit orientation of the dominant mass media firms. Advertising as a primary income source of the mass media. 3. The reliance of media on information provided by government, business, and experts funded and approved by these primary sources and agents of power. And 4. Flack as a means of disciplining the media. And 5. Anti-communism as a national religion. These elements interact with and reinforce one another. The raw material of news must pass through successive filters, leaving only the cleansed residue fit to print. They fix the premises of discourse and interpretation and the definition of what is newsworthy in the first place, and they explain the basis and operations of what amount to a propaganda campaign. Okay, so that was long. I'll cut that down. But the point I'm trying to make here, Benjamin, is would you say that the negative responses to your work, or even the allegations of your channel being a propaganda channel, is actually because it conflicts with the actual propaganda system?
I honestly don't know. Yeah, I think to an extent there are a lot of people who, I mean, not a lot. I mean, it really is a minority, but there are people who will just entirely disregard the let's say an entire video. Like I think a good example is the public transport video, which is just about Pyongyang. So it's talking about the tram network, the bus network. It's an incredibly boring infrastructure related video. If you're not interested in infrastructure, it's not going to be too exciting. But there are people who disregarded all of that information entirely and just say, "Oh, I don't believe any of this." And I go, "Well, it's not actually that controversial of a topic. It's just buses." But I think that that stems from, if you are taught something so, I mean, as with all things, DPRK, as with everything else in the world, nothing is black and white. It's all nuanced. But if you're taught to ignore the nuance and you're taught, here is information, if the DPRK is this, and if you hear anything that diverts from that, then that must be wrong. So I don't set out to try and prove anything right or wrong. I'm just going, look, you can take a trolley bus or you can get a tram. And then I think some people have seen that and gone, that doesn't line up with what I've heard. But I think to an extent, I think that's one thing that in that quote that I latched onto was the point about anti-communism as a religion. I mean, I don't make my political beliefs, I don't publish them and I don't talk about them, and everyone has their own things. But I think, especially looking at the States now, this sort of idea of, I mean, it's always been that, X, Y, and Z is communism, because people don't understand really what it means. So nowadays it might be wearing a mask is communism, and then 50 years ago it was race mixing is communism. And that doesn't make any sense. Like, that's just someone having a word and going, that's a bad word.
And now Biden is a communist.
Everyone's a communist now, from what I'm reading in the news. Everyone who's not entirely on board with what you think is a communist. So I think I agree to that extent. And again, that's why I don't let it affect me. I know people who have done YouTube and stuff, and they get knocked down massively by those comments. I don't so much, because I just see that it just comes from a place of either absolute refusal to take new information into account. I think when you study a topic, I think in any field, you have that horrible paradox of the more you learn about something, the more you realize you don't know anything about it. So people who don't understand anything might think it's easy. Oh, I could learn about this. The more you learn about something, and the more you know there is to learn, suddenly you realize you're very ill-informed. And I think that just a lot of that comes from a place of people who are interested in the country at a surface level, which is fair. No one else needs to be obsessed like me. I think they're perhaps not having an understanding of how much they don't know, and so they say, well, this doesn't line up with maybe what I've seen before, and I think that's why it's fine. I haven't got a problem with people voicing their opinions on it.
Yeah, so make sure if you're gonna comment on one of Benjamin's videos, at least like it and subscribe.
Yes, thank you. Yes, do that, and then you can say whatever you want in the comments. That's fine.
With that said, so that we're just talking about your work. So what are things to just what are some major misconceptions about North Korea or the DPRK that make you cringe and they frustrate you when you hear them in Western media or on social media, etc.?
So like I said, my background is in tourism, so I can think of some examples focusing in on that industry, because as I said, the DPRK is one of those places where it's not a monolith, so I really can't speak to most industries, but I can speak about tourism. And in my experience, people want it to be scarier than it is. So we would take people in, and there is perhaps a level of, also some of them are surprised that it's not terrifying, and it is fine. Like visiting in terms of being a tourist and stuff, it's not a terrifying experience. But that being said, some people want to go back with exciting stories. And I recall going in 2019 with a young chap on the tour who came up to me on the bus and said, I think all of the trees are made of plastic. I just saw someone dusting them. And I said, that sounds like a lot more work than just planting trees. And it's just that, no. He was adamant that these were fake. And I was like, what? Why? Why would they do that? And then also this idea of everywhere I go, everything's going to be fake and staged. And that's just, I think, some people overestimating their own importance. Country doesn't care what you see. Like, you go into the country and I go, I was in this spa and it was full of people. They were all actors. And I go, no, they weren't, because the country doesn't care about you that much. They're not going, we've got a group of 15 tourists. We must prepare a whole series of set pieces. Like, they don't. Of course, they don't think like that. But people want that, so they, in a way, I suppose, trick themselves into seeing it. And you wouldn't walk around the streets of, I'm from the UK. You wouldn't walk around London going, that man's hair looks a bit weird. I think it's a wig. But people will do that in Pyongyang and go, he's clearly an actor. And also, people vlogging and doing videos, that's fine. But they'll go and sit in the darkest corner of the hotel while we're all downstairs having a beer and going, I'm here in the Yanggakdo International Hotel, and it's terrifying, and none of the lights work. And then you walk up and be like, well, mate, we're all downstairs having a beer. Do you want to? No? Okay. Like, that kind of, that's an anecdote from a friend of mine, actually. He did do that. He walked up to this chap filming in a corridor and just went, we're downstairs. Do you want a beer? And it sort of ruined his little video. But that's, from my perspective, I can say that kind of thing. That's what I know, and that's what I find hilarious and upsetting, because I know a lot of people who visited and they do it out of a genuine curiosity and are willing to just learn by going and just understanding a bit more about the country, whereas there are a lot of people who will go and have a very fixed view and want to see things to back that up, and they want to go home and have a good story. Like, I understand that it's not very exciting to say I went to the DPRK on holiday and it was fine, because it's almost always fine. It's not, you're not going to go back with a hugely dramatic story. Yeah, so that's, in my experience, the biggest misconceptions that make me cringe more than anything.
I feel like that scary, that's spooky North Korean tourist trip, it's like a genre of film now.
It is, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
If you go on YouTube, so essentially every tourist video will add that music.
I'm here in this uninhabited part of the city. You're not, though. Yes. I think it's the nature of today's media that you need to be exciting and have something to pull people in, a pull factor into a video. And titling a video, I went on the Pyongyang metro and had a conversation in Korean with a lady, is not as exciting as this completely fake metro. You're not allowed to see any of the other stations because they're not real. That's a much more exciting title. Just because it's not real and a complete lie does not mean that it's not, clickbait, essentially.
I remember watching, this would have been like at least 10 years ago. I mean, I'm sure you saw this as well, the Vice documentary.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe that might have been like the first one, or like the first of that genre.
It was probably one of the earlier documentaries where it was essentially all of these. There's a lot of documentaries, and I spend a lot of my life trawling through them, that are essentially just filming a tour. Tourism is sort of my sector, so we spend a lot of time planning these tours and working out the itineraries that we want to do. And a lot of people will go in and just film what happens, and then that is that is a whole section of DPRK documentaries. It's just having filmed a tour, but they never, like, so in Vice, for example, they have all this stuff about getting sort of secretly smuggled in. That didn't happen. They were on a tour. They were on a tour with our partners in the country that we've worked with, and they're essentially just filming what happened. Especially with YouTube now, a lot of people, we've had tourists in the past who are YouTubers and want to just vlog it, and that's fine. And and it doesn't need to be terrifying and scary. A lot of them are just travel vloggers, and so they're doing the DPRK this week, and next week they'll be in India, and the week after they'll be in, I don't know, Tajikistan or something. So that's I like that kind of angle, because they're there from the perspective of a traveler, not from the perspective of I'm here experiencing this off the beaten track place. They come as a tourist, and I think that's honest. So I do like that.
Some tourists, Mike, and this goes for not just, of course, the DPRK, but any other country, they go with this expectation to like exoticize the place, and whether it's in a negative or positive way, like kind of an Orientalist approach to the country.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you have any memories or experiences of your time in North Korea, your trips there, that you'd like to share? And also, before you get to that, actually, could you, like, how did you get involved with tourism there?
The DPRK has interested me since I was about 12. So it's really been a big chunk of my life now. And so when I was 18, I moved to Seoul to learn Korean, because I thought that would be a practical thing to have. But before I went, I was in London about 3 or 4 weeks before I left, and there was an art exhibition displaying packaging and materials from North Korea. And it was by a guy that I'd heard of before called Nick. He's a British guy based in Beijing who runs Koryo Tours, which is I would say the longest running, the most experienced, the really professional company. And so I emailed him when I was in Seoul and said, I've done this, and this is what I'm interested in, and here's some things I've worked on in the past. I would love one day to come and work for your company. And he said, why don't you come and intern? So I did. And I moved to Beijing and I interned, and then I got a job there. And again, I mean, I've done some talks at schools in the UK talking about alternative, different things you want to pursuing things you're interested in. And I've always said, as a result of that, just send emails to people, because the worst they're going to say is no. And in that case, I very much got dragged into the field. And then I think once you have a foot in the door, you meet more people and more people and more people, and suddenly you're involved in something that you're really interested in and passionate about. And I've not really stopped since then.
No, that's awesome. I feel like maybe sometimes that kind of advice is like just emailing people or like this cold calling and stuff like that is like that's a boomer thing that doesn't work anymore.
I mean, I always look at it, if people send me emails, I mean, you contacted me, and I love getting emails. I always think about the other person. If you're worried I'm going to send this, the worst they're going to say is we can't do X, Y, and Z. I was expecting them to reply and say, maybe this, that, and the other, we could work on this. And they literally just said, well, we could do with an intern. So off you come. I still do work with them. So being based in Mongolia, I think we might touch on that in a bit about some of the Mongolia stuff I've done. But being based in Mongolia now, I run the Mongolia Soviet tour for them, which is a tour they do here, which is looking at older derelict fighter bases and stuff. So I still do the occasional bit of work with them, but also now much more independent. It's been a springboard, in my view.
And that's awesome. Off that, so do you have any memories or experiences traveling there that you want to talk about?
I think the best experience I had, I mean, there's lots of great things that I can recall, but best experience I think I had was we'd spent the morning in Pyongyang, and we were driving to Kaesong, which for anyone who doesn't know is about 3 hours south of Pyongyang and is essentially the city nearest the demilitarized zone, which separates the northern half and the southern half of the country. And so we were heading down there, but we stopped in a city called Sarewon, which is about halfway down. It's a good rest stop because it's quite a long drive. So it's a good little rest stop. We stopped in this little, what they call a little folklore village, which is a little area that has some sort of buildings in it, trying to evoke some of the cultural history of the country and things. And I wasn't hugely interested because I knew they were teaching a lot of stuff, really. They were talking a lot about the history of the country. So I not wandered off as such, but it's at the base of this hill in the middle of the city, which has views over the whole of Sarewon. So I walked up this hill with a couple of other tourists, and we got to the top, and there's a pavilion that looks out over the city, gets some great photos. And there was 3 or 4 soldiers from the Korean People's Army up there, and they were taking photos subtly of the tour of me and the tourists and things with a digital camera. And my Korean was good enough at the point to be able to turn around and surprise them and say, "Why are you taking photos of us? We're not that beautiful." And then we could have a conversation and a couple of tourists, and then they asked if we would take photos of them. So I had their camera and I was taking photos of the tourists with these soldiers. And then the tourists headed back down, and I said, "Look, can I get a photo on my phone?" Took a nice group photo. It's one of my, I haven't shown it to anyone. It's one of my personally favorite photos I've got, because they were all my age. I was only 19 at the time, and so were these guys. And it was such a strange thing to be able to have a conversation with these guys that had grown up in Sarawon, which is, it's not Pyongyang. It's a nice city. It's a provincial capital, but it was such a world away from how I grew up. And to be able to have that conversation and find common ground, I treasure that as one of my favorite moments in the country.
Well, that's a great one. Were there any other ones you wanted to share?
I mean, some of the, to be honest, there's loads, but some of it is just basic stuff. I mean, just going into the demilitarized zone, so Panmunjom, which I've just made a video about, little plug there. Going into the joint security area, I've never been from the southern side. I've only ever been from the northern side, but it is just it's just an incredibly interesting experience. You go into this building, you first you pass under a big granite gate that says Independent Unification on it in Korean, and then you go into this room where you can buy paintings or pin badges or other little souvenirs. And then you get into a room where they have this huge map on the wall, and the lieutenant in command gives a little overview of where we're going to go, where we're going to drive. And then you go to, the northern side is much more interesting than the southern side, because the northern side has the negotiation buildings. All of Panmunjom, as it was a village where the negotiations were, which is now on the northern side of the DMZ. So going from the northern side, you actually get to see kind of where everything happened. And they have the armistice agreements under glass, and the flags that were on the desks during the signing all under glass. And then you go down and do the usual stuff, looking at the blue buildings that cross the MDL. So again, that's not necessarily a really poignant experience. That's just something I love doing.
Yeah, no, it's quite a monumental historical site.
Oh, definitely. The history is incredible, and it's so recent. There's many people alive today who were part of that conflict. So yeah.
In our discussion, we of course haven't touched on, of course, the history of the country, the rich history of the country before the two Koreas were split even. But I do recommend people check out the podcast called Blowback. I believe it's their 3rd season of the show. They do a very in-depth covering of what's known as the Korean War, at least by Americans. So have you listened to it before?
I haven't, no, but I will have to now.
Oh, you have to. It is excellent. Yeah. So recently, I think maybe as of earlier this year or late last year, the North Korean government started funding vloggers, essentially on YouTube, on Twitter, I think on TikTok as well, to post videos about life, particularly in Pyongyang. There's an 11-year-old girl who was talking about her life there, about, I believe, things like reading Harry Potter and just doing normal kid stuff. And there's an older woman as well doing videos too, just walking around town. So this was early this year. Then by the summer, a bunch of these videos and channels were shut down.
Yeah.
Because they were apparently in breach of the U.S. sanction on North Korea, which have been in effect for decades. I think right now North Korea is the longest sanctioned country.
Very possibly, yeah.
North Korea, then Cuba, I think, is the second one. What are your thoughts on these vloggers?
To be honest, I haven't kept up with it. I have seen a lot of the videos, but I haven't kept up with it as much as maybe I should have. But I think it matches what the rest of the world is doing. This is the way that information is disseminated these days. It's all through vlogging and videos and social media. So it makes sense. That's where people are. And so, yeah, no, I understand it. And I thought some of the videos were great. And you do get an insight into some of the stuff. And seeing inside the country, especially during COVID when we couldn't go. We still can't go. But during the period when it was really, really shut down, I thought they were fantastic little insights. And, yeah, the ones I saw, I enjoyed on a level of interest. Yeah, no, I just thought they were very interesting. But no, I didn't watch as many as I should, and it's a shame now that you can't necessarily find all of them because they have been taken down.
Yeah, so I will say that even though they've been taken down, it looks like thankfully people did.
But yeah, I think a
download
lot
them.
they're available. I think they are available
Yeah.
if you could look for them. Yeah,
Exactly, they're still available. And like there's, I mean, kind of like just you mentioned, it's like every other country, of course, or people in other countries, they utilize social media to present an aspect of their culture or daily life. I did see one news network was talking about these vloggers, and they talked about how in one of the videos, it seemed like an interaction between the woman and some person on the street was scripted in a way. And like at least from even from my perspective, it actually did seem like, there was some kind of like forethought in what had happened. And I was like, is the person making this critique, have they ever like seen a YouTube short before?
yeah,
Or like,
yeah,
where
yeah.
like all of it's scripted, all of the pranks,
Yes.
all of these questionnaires, they're
Oh
asking
yeah,
people this
yeah,
question, and it's like, yeah,
yeah.
like, oh, are
I
you gonna,
think
it's like, yeah. Go ahead.
I think you can fall into this trap of holding the DPRK to a higher standard than other countries because it's the DPRK and you want to be suspicious. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there were things that were redone and but that happens in
Yeah,
every video. I
it's
mean,
media. Yeah.
it's media. It's the way that the way that media works. But yeah, no, I think it is. It's very much just the way the world works now. I mean, similarly in the industries that, so tourism, for example, I was doing a lot of the marketing side of things, and it is all about video and social media and all that kind of stuff. So the fact that it caused such a massive media frenzy, which actually they've been around for a long time. They only got picked up in the last year, but we knew of them in 2019, some of them. So they've been around for a while, some of them at least. But it only just got jumped on. I think because it was novel and they hadn't really seen it before. You do get. I mean, I think it to me it ties in with the stuff we've had tourists say before in the country, which is, oh, I was on the Pyongyang metro and this lady, I don't think they're allowed to speak to foreigners. I went, oh, why do you think that? She goes, oh, because I tried to talk to her and she didn't say anything. I went, what language were you using? Oh, I was speaking English. Ah, that'll be it. Because she doesn't speak English. Like, it ties in with this thing of wanting to, like you said, with the, I think it looked scripted. Even if it was or if it wasn't, people just want to see, they want to create these sort of narratives of it all being entirely fake and planned. And I do love, we've got the number of times we'll have tourists saying, are we allowed to speak to people on the street? I went, yeah, you can, but if you don't speak Korean, they're very unlikely to speak back to you. And they go, oh, I hadn't thought of that. So yeah, I think that sort of all ties in.
Wow. Okay. This conversation's been so good, Benjamin. You've even just that point right there is just great. So I guess I have another like big question for you then in that vein. Do all men in North Korea or DPRK, do the haircuts have to match Kim Jong Un?
No, I mean that's a, oh god, that's, I mean that's that poster that I think is in the Changwon Health Complex. I'm not sure if it's that one, but I've seen the equivalent posters. But I've seen those similar posters in London, which is, you go get your haircut in the UK and you go, what would you like, sir? I'll have this one and that. Yes, I mean that's no. That is the answer.
Oh man. Okay. I'm gonna say that's disappointing to know.
Sorry for bursting your bubble.
You'd mentioned this earlier that you're currently living in Mongolia, and it looks like you're also doing tours there for the Soviet era Mongolian sites that are still around. So you actually recently made a video about this as well. I didn't know that you were actually doing tours there. I knew that you'd made that video, which is, again, recommend people check out that video.
Yes, please do.
So why have you shifted to doing this work, and why did you decide to do a video for it?
Well, so I mean, it all stems, I think, from moving here. So I came here in 2021. Christ, that's a long time ago. Essentially, because couldn't get back into China because of COVID. I had a friend here that I worked with before who just said, "Why don't you move here?" And I didn't really have a reason to not move here. And it's an interesting country. I mean, I didn't know a lot about it, to be honest, but I always know it was interesting as a huge, incredibly the least densely populated country on Earth, and essentially outside of Ulaanbaatar, it's just mainly countryside, uninhabited. So I said I'd move here. It's also in the region that I'm interested in. Like, it's not a bad place to be based and work on DPRK stuff. It's very easy to live here. But I hadn't really looked into the Soviet history. I knew it had been socialist. I didn't know a lot about it until I moved here. But then very quickly, you see it. I mean, the city centre, the square, Sukbatar Square in the centre of the city, was built essentially as part of a big Soviet city plan for the city. and you go to the market. One of my favorite pastimes is going to the market and finding old Soviet communist stuff. I've got a huge collection of badges and medals and things. A lot of North Korea stuff ends up here. You find old DPRK pin badges and things, which I don't quite know how they ended up here. I made a video on it because we'd been down south to look at some of these old abandoned air bases. So again, to plug the video, if you watch the video, you'll see why they're there. But they have a huge number of fighter bases built that were not Mongolian. They were, by and large, Russian, Soviet. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, they started withdrawing in 1986, and then the Soviet Union collapsed, they were just abandoned. So they're still there. And I thought I said, I don't want to be so hemmed in just to the DPRK on the YouTube channel that I can't talk about something as mental as a massive MiG-21 abandoned fighter base in the Gobi Desert. And so we made the video. And also near Ulaanbaatar, there's another, what was a huge 15,000 strong military base that's just been demolished. And there are some buildings still standing with things like newspapers on the walls that were insulation. And so I think it piqued my interest so much. And the way I thought about it was, if I'm interested in this, people who watch the YouTube channel are probably going to have some interest because it is a similar vein. And so I made the video, and it was the first one I've been in, so it has me talking about things, which was weird for me to edit. But it was received so well, and people loved it, and especially Mongolians. A lot of Mongolians commented with things like, "It's nice to see the history of our country talked about, well, a period of our history aside from Genghis Khan and the medieval stuff that just dominates this country." It got so much good feedback from Mongolians, it got so much good feedback from the YouTube channel that I'm actually now working on a 2-part documentary about the Mongolian Revolution and the city planning of Ulaanbaatar. So it's really sort of it's going to be a little mini side series, I think.
Well, that's fantastic. I am very much looking forward to that 2-parter. Exactly to your point of like prior to watching that video, I'll be honest, I never really thought of Mongolia outside of Genghis Khan in that kind of time period. I couldn't have told you anything about what it's currently like or what it was like in the 20th century. And it's like, and it's a socialist country, and it's like my thing. It's what I'm interested in, and I still, hadn't really come across
a lesser known socialist country.
Exactly. Even though it was the second, I believe, after.
It was very, very.
Early,
it was 1921. 1921 was the revolution. So that's after the Soviet Union. It was hot on the heels of establishing a communist socialist government. So yeah, definitely. But people no one knows about it, mainly because it is just, Mongolia is essentially just this city in terms of, obviously it's huge and there are other smaller cities, but Ulaanbaatar is very much the heart of it. And so it's not got the reach of the Soviet Union or, let's say, the DPRK or Cuba. So people don't know about it, but there's so much history there. It's great.
And now I think we'll have to probe your mind another time on socialist Mongolia. So
I'd happy to.
Perfect. So, this wraps up the questions. Was there anything else that you wanted to share, or any last words, or anything like that? Final words?
Not final words. I think not especially. I'm going to do another plug for the YouTube channel. Please go and watch the YouTube channel because it does help me live. I'd also want to say I would encourage people to travel there. It's closed at the moment as of, what are we now, September 2023. We're not expecting it to open again this year, but hopefully next year. And I would encourage people to go, because even if you don't think you're seeing everything you want to see, and even if you think if you're not used to group tours or being on guided tours, you get such a better understanding of the country and sort of how it operates by going. So I would encourage anyone who can to go. If you can go with me, because why wouldn't you want that? But it would just open, I think, opens a lot of people's eyes to a country that really they don't know a lot about. And you can't learn everything about it, but you can learn a lot. So yes, I would encourage that, definitely.
So on that note, when do you have any inside information about when the DPRK will open up?
Nothing I can say with confidence.
Considering you work for them.
I do. Yes, of course. No, nothing I can say with any full confidence, but everything's moving in the right direction, and fingers crossed. Fingers crossed, essentially. But it looks like it's going the right way, and they've adopted a new law to promote foreign tourism, which I think is great. So it all looks very good.
Yeah, and they've built new facilities and new
Yeah.
hotels.
So it is. Yes, no, definitely. The other thing I'm going to plug as well. It's quite old. 4 or 5 years ago now. There's a great documentary before I worked for Choreo that they did with Michael Palin, who people in the States might not know, but he was part of Monty Python, which was that really popular British comedy troupe back in the 60s. And he came with us to the DPRK and did a couple of weeks of traveling around, and they filmed it. And it's called, I think, Michael Palin in North Korea. And it is the documentary I recommend to anyone who wants to watch a documentary on the country. So I'm going to plug that.
Awesome.
Great.
So then on that note, I'd like to say thank you, Benjamin, for joining today.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Definitely. I'm sure you've given our listeners insight into the country that they didn't have before. We learned the truth about the trains. We learned the truth about the haircut.
Definitely.
But we learned about your experiences and kind of the work that you do behind your channel. So hope to have you on the show again, and I guess I'll let you go
Great.
now.
Thank you. I'd love to. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Take care, Benjamin.